Good afternoon, dear colleagues. I want to thank everybody who joins us. Ukraine Media Center Ukrinform continues its operation today. It's been 9 years of the war, and today is day 379 of the full-scale invasion of our homeland by a Russian aggressor. And now we will be talking about the situation in Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. Joining us in this studio is Oleg Korikov, acting chairman of Держатомрегулювання and Chief State Inspector for Nuclear and Radiation Safety of Ukraine. Good afternoon, Mr. Oleg. This night, the Russians inflicted another massive missile strikes on our country. One of the results of that strike was the problem in Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. We've seen the report of Energoatom this morning, and they reported Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant was cut away from power supply, which may result in an emergency state with the radiation catastrophe for all the world. So what are the consequences? What may happen? Thank you for this invitation. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to deliver this report. Within the last year, the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant was occupied by the Russian invaders, and it resulted in the degrading of nuclear safety. Since the September last year, Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant transformed into a consumer of the electric power. Before the occupation, a quarter of Ukrainian electricity was produced by the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, and it accounted for the half of the nuclear energy produced in Ukraine. Now all the operations are suspended there. From the very first of occupation, the occupiers controlled the access to the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, and respectively, it results in the fact that different propagandists, military personnel, military equipment, weapons, munitions, and vehicles get to the territory of the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. Rosatom and Rostechnadzor, they gather in the Russia, and in Belarus they gather some personnel which is not properly qualified to operate in the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, and for the time being, the occupiers block any access to the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. They don't allow any Ukrainian personnel to the facility. I mean the Ukrainian personnel which is properly qualified, which is skilled, and they have experience of working in the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant to ensure its proper operation. Those are the inadequate actions. And I will want to continue about the illegal modifications. What's happening in the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant? They changed the technical condition of the nuclear reactors. There is the storage for the processed fuel near the reserve diesel power station. They built some unidentified facilities. The occupiers illegally intervene the system of heat supply, power supply. They try to connect different devices to that system, and the influence of those devices was not considered before. So those are absolutely illegal resolutions, and there is no reasoning for such things, and emergency readiness is being degraded as a result of that. Internal crisis center, which is located in the platform of the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, is being disassembled, and Russian military are being stationed there all the time, so that crisis center does not fulfill its functions. The external crisis center, which is located in Zaporizhzhia, does not obtain any information of the on the operation of the safety systems. So in fact, that crisis center, the external crisis center in Zaporizhia is not operating because the occupiers rendered it out of water. The fire teams, the firefighting teams in the territory of Zaporizhia nuclear power plant, there were 2 units previously, and with the beginning of occupation there is only 1 team remaining, and the terror of Russian occupiers resulted in the fact that now the fire rescue unit is not operating either. It suspended its operation. So those are the consequences we're having now. So we've lost the reliable electric power supply. This is what you've just asked today about today's events. As we know, any nuclear power plant should be ensured with should be provided with the stable power supply, and the part of electricity which is being normally produced by a nuclear power plant is being consumed by it for its own needs. Since all the 6 blocks are stopped, the atomic power plant consumes the nuclear power from the power grid of Ukraine. As a result of the shelling of the missile attack by the occupier, there were 5 events of a total shutdown of power supply when the nuclear power plant switched to diesel generators. This is how the safety systems react to the shutdowns. So there are 20 stationary electric power generators in the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant, and this attack on the critical infrastructure facilities of Ukraine once again resulted in the loss of external power supply. That was the sixth time when it lost the external power supply, and the reserve systems reacted, and now the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant just produces electric power at the expense of diesel power generators available at the facility. The reserve of fuel is accounted for 10 days at least. So in view of the above mentioned information, the risks of emergency situation in the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant, they keep growing, and our capabilities of preventing them and reacting to such emergencies in proper manner keep reducing. It all happens regardless of the permanent presence of the IAEA mission in the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant, and Russia, who is a member of the Council of IAEA, continues disregarding international conventions and agreements, continues violating the resolutions of IAEA and safety regime. Us, as Держатомрегулювання, we restricted the operation of Zaporizhia nuclear power plant, the blocks of Zaporizhia nuclear power plant, and we actually stopped any operation and any recommissioning and production of recommission of the facilities and production of electric power is impossible at the moment, and the only way to revert to the normal operation is to transfer it back under the control of the legit competent operating organization, which is Energoatom, and return to the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant of the regulating body, which is us again. Thank you. Mr. Oleg, as to the scenarios, how can the situation develop? We try to reestablish the power supply for the needs of internal consumers, for the needs of internal consumption of Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant? Are we about to be led to the facility, allowed there? You mentioned that diesel generators will be working within the next, say, 10 days, but what's gonna happen then? Well, us as the Ukrainian party, we unfortunately, we don't have access to the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, and we cannot replenish the reserve of diesel fuel there for those reserve power generators. But again, as I mentioned, we have some reserve of time there, and reestablishment of a safety regime is only possible if it gets back under control of Ukraine, and this is only possible under the conditions of full reestablishment of control of Ukrainian bodies, Ukrainian authorities. And we see the efforts of Mariana Grossi on establishment of the safety zone and security zone in the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. We are satisfied and we support all such aspirations. We support that the head of the chair of IAEA supports the Ukrainian position, that he supports demilitarization and deoccupation of Zaporizhzhia NPP, and we can't wait to see the positive results of the negotiations as to the nuclear power plant. Dear colleagues, your questions, please. Oksana Polishuk, Ukrinform, can you give us more detail? What are the specific threats of replanning and amending the technical condition of the nuclear power plant? It increases the risks of emergency or emergency situation in the facility. There is the system of management of configuration of nuclear power plant, in compliance with which every shift we consider the impact on safety. When such impact is not considered, it contradicts the fundamental principles of safety and security. In fact, the principle of responsibility is completely destroyed because the operating organization is illegitimate, and the legitimate Ukrainian operating organization does not in fact operate, and many fundamental principles are infringed. Oleg Bachun, Vice President for the Academy of Energy of Ukraine. Today, Ukraine requires the autonomous sources of generations. The projects of Toshiba mini blocks of 150-200 megawatts, are they going to be available in Ukraine? Because there are many, we hear many things like Toshiba promises it and USA promises it, but the autonomous nature of generation, they are very important. Is it ever gonna happen in Ukraine? Well, thank you for your question. We have Держатомрегулювання. It's in the center of the processes of implementation of new technologies in Ukraine, the new technologies for nuclear power plants. There is the government resolution for implementation of AP1000 solution in Khmelnytsk nuclear power plant, and we're moving towards its implementation. There is a number of measures being taken for implementation in Ukraine of a small module reactors, new scale technologies, SMR 160, Goltec International, and other manufacturers. And for the time being, we're studying the documents for analysis of safety and security of those technologies. And the licensee, the operating organization, and the regulating body are preparing for implementation of those technologies. Thank you. Another question. Before Energoatom declared that all the Ukrainian nuclear power plants before year 2024 should switch to American fuel. How can Ukraine implement this solution if some of the power blocks operate on Russian fuel? Well, look, Ukraine refused supplies of the Russian fuel since the beginning of invasion on the 24th of February 2022. And Russian fuel is not being supplied to Ukraine anymore. Thanks to our joint project with the United States of America, with the company Westinghouse, we have licensed, there is a licensed manufacturer of nuclear fuel which may be used in the Ukrainian reactors of VVR model. And currently the fuel of a friendly manufacturer keeps coming to Ukrainian nuclear power plant and will be loaded to the active areas of the reactors. We don't have this level of readiness as at VVR 440 facilities, but by the end of the year we plan to get it fully loaded with the first shipment of fuel manufactured by Westinghouse in the power blocks of VVR 440 model. That's a big example of that's a huge task that we jointly, in cooperation with the United States, try to solve. Dear friends, are there any more questions? Yes, another question as to the personnel on the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. What is the latest information? What are the latest news? What's going on with the people who remain there? Well, it's kind of complicated to answer this question. I started my career at the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. I've been working there for 5 years, right upon my graduation from the institute. Well, the situation is very difficult there. Ukrainian personnel is being blocked there, all of their permits. However, they continue to fulfill their duties. They're licensed in Ukraine. They are Ukrainian patriots. However, there is a huge pressure exercised on them, real pressure. The situation is real difficult. As to the figures, well, I recommend you to ask Energoatom, the operating organization. Mr. Oleg, another question, a couple of more details about the situation in the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. There was information, one of the experts mentioned that Russians started removing everything they can from the nuclear power plant. We were observing the same situation in other facilities during the occupation of Kherson. For example, in Kherson region, does it tell us that they are preparing to leave our nuclear power plant? Do you have any comments on that? Well, thank you, but I cannot comment this question. Thank you very much, dear colleagues. Thank you for your interest to this topic. I'm reminding you, joining us was Oleg Korikov, active chairman of Держатомрегулювання, the Chief State Inspector for Nuclear and Radiation Safety of Ukraine. Thank you for this broadcast. Our next briefing is at 16:30. Bear with us. Trust in our armed forces, and glory to Ukraine. Thank you. Glory to Ukraine.